With us here in New York, NBC News correspondent Von Hilliard tracking the Trump transition, and senior business correspondent Christine Romans. Also joining us, Washington Post national editor and MSNBC political analyst Philip Rucker. So, Christine, we're seeing the markets already reacting, but talk to us in terms of what goods, what industries, what kind of impact it's going to have on Americans.
Just about everything you touch, it will have an impact on. Cars, for example. Big car industry in Canada, for example, that half of the cars made in Canada are made by American companies, and half of the parts in those cars come from the United States. And all of those parts go back and forth multiple times before a final assembled vehicle is sold. You start putting 25% tariffs on each of those moves, and you're adding to the price of a car. Tomatoes coming from Mexico, any kind of produce coming from Mexico. And a lot of our imports come from Mexico in terms of grocery items. Those would cost more money. And let me explain why. Because the president-elect doesn't believe this or doesn't acknowledge this. But the entity that writes the check for the import tax is the importer, the company that's then going to send it to a grocery store or to a car dealership. So that cost is passed on to consumers. So consumers would face higher prices for things. And in the very near term, the stock market is simply reacting to the fact that it's disruptive. Even if this is just a threat from the president-elect, already people are signing deals to import goods in the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks. And so they are facing higher prices ahead.
I mean, these three countries, Mexico, Canada, China, imported more than, well, we imported from them more than $1 trillion worth of goods in the last year. If we're expecting these tariffs, prices could go up. Should people start stocking up on certain items?
Well, businesses already have been if they can, but small and medium-sized businesses don't have $500,000 laying around to buy, ingredients now that they might need next year. So the big companies have been preparing, but smaller companies are at a disadvantage. I'd make one last point, too. Mexico and Canada, the president, in his first administration, basically jettisoned NAFTA and made his own USMCA, U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. This would be in violation of his own perfect trade agreement that he made. So raising questions about what that means in terms of the rules-based order for international trade.
That's such a good point. And Vaughn, not only did the president have his own trade deal with a couple of these countries, he threatened other tariffs last time around that he didn't end up following through on. So will he follow through this time?
And he went through with a lot. And let's be very clear. Americans have already lived through a trade war in 2018 and 2019. And you should also expect retaliatory tariffs, right? The U.S. exports $2 trillion worth of goods. And we saw in 2018 and 2019, those countries, Mexico, Canada, China, our European allies, they placed retaliatory tariffs on our goods that American producers and manufacturers who rely on those export markets, whether you're a lobster farmer in Maine or whether you're a soybean producer in Nebraska, they have spent years developing these markets, buyers overseas, but then there was a retaliatory tariff that was placed. And so really this is just going to call into question what is Donald Trump actually looking for out of any trade deal, whether it be with a new USMCA 2.0 or out of a China trade deal, because the Americans, they suffered losses in 2018, 2019, and 2020 because of the trade war. What does Donald Trump want out of these? It's not quite clear.
And taxpayers kicked in for billions and billions of dollars to make, American farmers whole again after they were retaliated against. So taxpayers paid the price. And consumers paid the price in higher prices.
So, Phil, even before taking office, this is where we're at. Trump's blowing up his own trade agreement. He's picking an economic fight with America's allies and a rival. What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, it shouldn't be surprising, though, because this is exactly what Donald Trump ran on in his campaign all year. These tariffs were at the top of his agenda. He talked about it at virtually every turn. And, he could argue that because he won the presidency and won the popular vote, that there is support for this kind of a dramatic measure on day one. I think it's going to be a real challenge, however, for his incoming economic team, the new Treasury Secretary, as well as some of his foreign policy leaders to really help implement this in a way that doesn't disrupt the U.S. economy too dramatically and that also can keep sort of the global alliances in check. That's going to be a massive challenge for the administration to navigate in those opening days, assuming these tariffs go into place.
So Trump's Treasury Secretary pick, Scott Bessent, said this about the tariffs the day after the election. Watch.
My view, and I don't have a say now yet or maybe ever, but is that I would recommend that tariffs be layered in gradually, which would the price adjustment would be over a period of time.
Vaughn, he recommends the tariffs be gradual. It doesn't sound like what Trump is saying in his tweets or in his social media posts is gradual. Is there a disconnect?
No, and Howard Lutnick, who is going to be the Commerce Secretary, has also talked about having more targeted tariffs because there are some, for example, manufactured parts, like for automobiles, that American manufacturers don't make, which is what requires, right? Like Cummins is a diesel engine company based out of Indiana. There are some parts that they rely on to be coming into the United States to use for their machines. And when you have that tariff that is placed on it, it only increases the size of the price of the engines, which gets to Scott Bessent's point and Howard Lutnick's point, is that there needs to be some more targeted tariffs. But that's not what Donald Trump is pushing for. He's kind of going across the board, tough style of politics approach here. And when you're talking also, come back to what is the goal at the back end of this? And when we go back to that China trade deal, the first go around, Donald Trump justified the trade war in large part to try to cut back on the manipulation of the marketplace by China, cut down on IP theft. But in all of those stated goals of the Trump administration, they never came to fruition. So Donald Trump is saying he's going to place tariffs on Canada and Mexico to cut down on migration and drugs. This is playing with the economy at the same time you're trying to play with another issue.
Right. It's all about the border. It's coming back to the border.
There's a lot at stake here.
Take a listen to Eric Trump talking about what the purpose is of these tariffs.
You want to allow drugs to come through our southern border? We're going to tariff you. You want to allow them to come through Canada? We're going to tariff you. China, if you're going to allow this stuff to get sold in our country, largely produced in China, we're going to add another 10% to your tariff. We are going to cost your countries, your economies. We're going to cost your businesses billions, hundreds of billions of dollars.
Christine, you touched on this earlier, but the first Trump administration did hit China with some tariffs. What was the outcome of that? Did China feel the pain?
And did try to get China to make some agreements about fentanyl and the things that ingredients in drugs, and it didn't work, right? Look, the pain was felt by American producers, American factories, American farmers especially. I mean, American farmers were really hammered, pork producers and whiskey producers and all these things that had these big counter tariffs on. The question is, if President-elect Trump puts on tariffs on day one, are there then counter tariffs? And then that's what becomes a trade war. And that can be really disruptive to supply chains, to prices for American consumers. And again, the person who pays the tariff, the entity that pays the tariff, China is not writing a check for an import tax. That is the importer, the American company that then, if you listen to the earnings calls from these companies, they have been all saying on the record they're going to pass those costs on to American consumers.
Philip, Trump says these countries could easily stop the flow of fentanyl, but we have to point out the Department of Homeland Security says the vast majority of fentanyl crossing the border is being smuggled in by U.S. citizens in their personal vehicles. So is this policy really about stopping fentanyl?
Well, clearly, Trump has made that argument. He has said this is a retaliation for the flow of fentanyl as well as the flow of undocumented migrants. But it's not as simple as he might portray. And it's not as if, the leaders of Mexico, for example, can just flip a switch and decide to stop all flow of fentanyl and it would suddenly stop. This is a very complicated issue in terms of the drug war and the drug trade. It's illicit, it's illegal, but it is happening and happening through so many different geopolitical forces. And so it's not as simple as the president-elect portrays, but it is what he says is a motivating factor for these tariffs that he wants to impose on day one.
Phil, Trump has made a lot of big promises for day one. Tariffs, deportations, dozens of executive orders at the ready. Is there any skepticism inside his team that he can actually implement these things on day one?
Well, they know how hard it's going to be to implement these things on day one, but one of the effects of having made all of these personnel decisions in terms of the cabinet leaders so quickly after the election is that they now have a period of time to actually plan to execute this in terms of governing, to get those executive orders in place, to figure out that agenda, and to create sort of get the paper flow ready so that this can all fall into place on day one in a more orderly fashion. he has finished assembling this cabinet much, much sooner than he did 8 years ago during the 2016 transition. And so that's a sign that at least they have the time now to try to prepare for this and develop a plan of action.
Well, in this morning's New York Times, columnist Thomas Friedman, who will join our discussion tonight, wrote, "This is a big deal." He was referring just to the possibility that President Biden's special envoy, Amos Hochstein, who will also join our discussion tonight, was on the verge of negotiating a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. Then, at 3:38 p.m. today, this happened.
Good afternoon. Today I have some good news to report from the Middle East. I just spoke with the Prime Minister of Israel and Lebanon. I'm pleased to announce that their governments have accepted the United States proposal to end the devastating conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. Under the deal reached today, effective at 4 a.m. tomorrow local time, the fighting across the Lebanese-Israeli border will end. This is designed to be a permanent cessation of hostilities.
Earlier in the day in Lebanon, it did not seem that peace was at hand. The New York Times reports in the hours before Israeli ministers approved the deal, the Israeli military launched one of its heaviest barrages of airstrikes since the war began, hitting the heart of Beirut and Hezbollah-dominated neighborhoods south of the city. Thomas Friedman writes that the deal means that, quote, Hezbollah and by extension Iran have decided to de-link themselves from Hamas in Gaza and stop the firing from Lebanon for the first time since October 8th, 2023, the day after Hamas invaded Israel. President Biden pointed out today that this has been the deadliest conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in decades. NBC News reports that approximately 1.2 million people in Lebanon and 60,000 people in northern Israel have been driven from their homes because of the attacks across the border.
This deal supports Lebanon's sovereignty, and so it heralds a new start for Lebanon, a country that I've seen most of over the years, a country with rich history and culture. If fully implemented, this deal can put Lebanon on a path toward a future that's worthy of its significant past. And just as the Lebanese people deserve a future of security and prosperity, so do the people of Gaza. They too deserve an end to the fighting and displacement. The people of Gaza have been through hell. Their world's absolutely shattered. Far too many civilians in Gaza have suffered, far too much. And Hamas has refused for months and months to negotiate a good faith ceasefire and a hostage deal. And so now Hamas has a choice to make. Their only way out is to release the hostages, including American citizens, which they hold. In the process, bring an end to the fighting, which would make possible a surge of humanitarian relief.
President Biden acknowledged that there is much more work to do to bring peace to the region, but he said today's deal is proof that peace is possible.
Now Israel must be bold in turning tactical gains against Iran and its proxies into a coherent strategy that secures Israel's long-term safety and advances a broader peace and prosperity in the region. Today's announcement is a critical step in advancing that vision. And so I applaud the courageous decision made by the leaders of Lebanon and Israel to end the violence. It reminds us that peace is possible. Say that again, peace is possible. As long as that is the case, I will not for a single moment stop working to achieve it.
The United States led the ceasefire negotiations, and the lead negotiator for President Biden in the negotiations is our first guest tonight, Amos Hochstein. He began working in Washington as a young staffer in the House of Representatives, then served in the Obama administration and now the Biden administration. If you're hearing his name for the first time tonight, you're not the only one. He's one of those people working in government who are not there for the attention. But he's much better known in the places where people's lives depend on how well he could do his job in achieving a ceasefire. People in Beirut, with their lives at stake in the ceasefire negotiations, know all about Amos Hochstein. And so, when he showed up at a Starbucks in Beirut last week, people working there were so grateful that he was trying to stop the fighting that they refused to let him pay despite his best efforts. Leading off our discussion tonight is White House senior advisor Amos Hochstein. He served as the lead U.S. negotiator in the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And how did it turn out at the Starbucks? Did they let you pay?
Oh, thanks, Lawrence. No, they wouldn't let me pay. They kept saying, you're our guest, and we appreciate what you're trying to do. We won't let you pay.
As Tom Friedman says, this is a big deal. It's very obviously a big deal now that it has really happened. What would you say was the key to bringing it together in the end?
Look, I think, Lawrence, this has been a devastating conflict. 18 years of calm since the 2006 war, and here we are again. And really, this is a conflict, as the president said today, that was imposed on the Lebanese people. October 7th happened, and Hamas attacked Israel, and Hezbollah decided to join in on the attack a few hours later on the early morning of October 8th. Not representing the Lebanese people who repeatedly through this year have expressed, we don't want this war. We didn't want it then, we don't want it now. So really it was about how do you get to a point of telling the Israelis, look, you've gotten a lot of gains on the ground militarily, but you need, if you really want security, you got to leverage your gains on the battlefield to political gains, because your ultimate security is only through an agreement with Lebanon, not by imposing it. And the same thing for the Lebanese. At some point, you got to say, look, enough is enough. And we are willing to take the steps that are difficult, perhaps politically in Lebanon, but to say we're going to assert control over our own country and we're going to care about our own people. And the style of negotiations that I tried to have here was to say to people, look, what do you really want? What is important to you? And for Israel, it's to return their people home with security. And for the Lebanese, it's to end this war and to rebuild the shattered lives. And if we can find a path that sort of threads the needle, I thought we could do it, and we were able to do it. But I will tell you, it was not easy. This was a very difficult negotiation, partly because of the involvement of Iran and Hezbollah and other forces from the outside. But I'm glad we were able to do it, and I think we're, by doing it now, able to save a lot of lives that would have been injured and killed over the coming days, weeks, and months.
Should Donald Trump regain the White House, anything goes. Anything goes. And woe is us if we are so self-interested, so selfish, that we would not only hold our nose, but suspend our principles to support him again.
Some of Geraldo Rivera's words before this election day. You spoke out. You are a former friend of Trump, you self-described. You know a lot of the members of this incoming cabinet nominees because of your time at Fox, and a long time and award-winning TV news journalist who I think most of our viewers know. Welcome back, Geraldo.
Hi, Harry. How are you doing? Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. We heard your stark warning there. You did something that others have not done. You said, hey, you looked at the way the evidence changed and what Donald Trump has done, and you spoke out against him. We also now know that he won this election. So where do you stand, having raised those alarms, but also, of course, we all follow the rule of law and the election results. How do you think things are looking today?
What a great question. Where do I stand? in terms of the president, now that he's the president-elect, with this overwhelming mandate. I thought with some trepidation about the example of Morning Joe and Mr. and Mrs. And going down, kissing the ring, and so forth. And would I do that? I haven't yet. I don't expect to. Although he is the president of all America now, the campaign is over. I am reminded of the scene with Joe Biden and Donald Trump in front of the fire going on in the White House, and that's the way it used to be. I lament that that's not the way it was last time. Obviously, it was outrageous the way he behaved. It was more than outrageous. It was criminal, I think. But now he's the president, and the question is, what do you do about it? You could spend the next 4 years weeping in the library, but I don't know. I don't know whether I will. That could be, you could have like a question every Friday. Has Geraldo congratulated Donald Trump yet? Has he come to kiss the ring yet? Like Mika and Joe.
Yeah, I guess, so, look, there are people who, no, and I think there are people who look at it in a number of different ways. Covering this stuff versus whether you see yourself in dialogue with a politician is a distinction there. I mentioned your Fox colleagues. I'm sure that there's a certain association, right, with anyone that you know, and if you know someone and you like them, then okay, great, you think they're getting an opportunity. Although I think it's also fair to say that Donald Trump is so focused on casting that it seems like sometimes he's casting only from those that he knows already from television and not using the tremendous opportunity and resources of the United States government to recruit from everyone in the country. So notwithstanding that, I'm sure you have good things to say about some of them. What about that? Should the whole cabinet be coming off the airwaves?
That's an excellent question, and it does seem to me that he's taking the path of least resistance, and the television has played an inordinate role. But from my point of view, I have several different takes on it. Number one is I remember all those years, particularly when he won the election, how cool it was that your old buddy is a president of the United States. Now my old buddy is the Secretary of Defense designate. Let's say they get confirmed. The Attorney General of the United States, the Transportation Secretary, the head of the Secret Service. When you think about it in those terms, I never thought, coming from Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and West Babylon, Long Island, that I would be on a first-name basis with the people who run the most amazing country on earth, the most powerful country, so on and so forth. So it is humbling, and it is it distorts your reaction to things. Maybe you fight so it doesn't change your values that the positions that you express are your positions, and you stick by your principles. But it is a heady experience. Make no mistake about it. Now, in terms of
and it's interesting you use that word distort, and much has been said about the president-elect's fame, his so-called celebrity, and whether he's used that in a way as a crutch to distort things which otherwise wouldn't cut ice. I mean, I mentioned it earlier in the program, the ethics allegations that his aides faced last time, many of whom were driven out of office for it, and what they're facing now. The New York Times and a conservative outlet, as you know, Just the News from Solomon, reporting on allegations of influence peddling. That's not left or right. That's just unethical if proven. And then you go to the immigration issues, which I wanted to get your follow-up on, because, again, you say, well, is it distortive, or you recognize somebody, or you have a link with them? Fine. But what about when they're bad-mouthing so many of our fellow Americans, or people who are legal, documented immigrants, and some people who are undocumented? Take a listen to Geraldo, again, from that interview we did pre-election. This is what you said about some of that.
It is absolutely imperative that people whose names sound like mine understand that this guy says that we are poisoning the blood of the country. He says that it is in our genes that we commit murder. This is a guy who promises mass deportation of our friends and relatives should he regain the White House.
That's how you put it. And you were right about the mass deportation. We now have the headlines from the transition. He wants to declare a national emergency, use the military, and do mass deportations of the undocumented. What do you say to Donald Trump, someone who you knew for so many years, tonight? What do you say to him about what he's planning?
Well, I'm not sure he would take my advice on it, Ari, but let me be unequivocal about it. The part you have not yet gotten to is the fact that the confirmation came about the vast holding areas. So to convince people that they should not appeal their cases and drag out their stay, even if they're here and they have a right to due process 2 years down the line, to get them to leave now expeditiously, they're going to make those vast holding areas so unpleasant that people will be dying to get out to go home. I think that's the thinking. It is an obscenity. And everything I said pre-election, I say now in bold letters. This is horrifying what they have planned. Can you imagine a vast holding area? Just think of the Japanese internment in World War II. This is going to be that in a much vaster scale. And the more people that they crowd into these places, the more horrifying it's going to be. And it will weigh on the conscience of every American. You know, there'll be no distortion about it. There'll be no explaining about it. When you can look through a barbed wire fence and you see people that look just like you, and many of them in the country for a long time, people with mixed families where one is a citizen and the husband and then the other, the wife is not. This is going to be a horror. And it's really going to, I think, tarnish the reputation of the nation, and it should affect the conscience of everybody who sees it. Is there a problem with undocumented immigration? Obviously. But there must be a more humane solution than the one proposed. And what was Tom Homan doing down on the border anyway today? He's not in office yet. He doesn't have a job yet. He's not working for any administration now.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Earl. Number one, I think it's very interesting to get your take on all this, and I think people are listening to you, so that's striking. And we'll deal with it all together as a country. That's what we got to do. Before I lose you, it's not just politics here. As you know from your long time working in the press, one of the most striking things is you get your press badge or you go out to work and you talk to people, all kinds of people. And so, because I get time with you here, because you're not signed to another cable network like Fox right now, I wanted to just go back to your career. One of the most intense, striking, for some controversial legal interviews you did with none other than Charles Manson. Let's roll the tape.
Others have killed more, and they've done it more recently. But Charles Manson is a name that has taken its place in American infamy.
Do you feel remorse? I don't know what that is. You know what I think? That you are an evil person.
Right, I'm evil. I'm terrible.
You are terrible.
Oh, yeah, I'm awful. Look me straight away in the eye. Do I look like I'm guilty about anything?
You look more guilty than anyone I ever looked in the eye in my life.
Really?
You remember that interview? What can you tell us about that? What did you learn? And again, in the pioneering days of that earlier kind of rougher tumble TV, the interviews you did, the reporting you did, tell us about it.
Well, Manson really did reek of infamy. I really thought he was a disgusting person. And the worst thing about Manson and his popularity was the fact that he was the biggest selling T-shirt in the country at that time. It was a bizarre perversion in pop culture where this mass murderer was a celebrity as well as a disgusting criminal. It really Manson spooked me more than most. And I did several specials on crime specials dealing with mass murderers, various ones, the prostitution murders in Long Island and so forth. It's a weird part of life, but I've always been able Ari, and I think you must also have that release valve where you can be professionally engaged in something in a circumstance that is horrible or very unpleasant or repulsive or whatever it is, and you still have a kind of a distance.
We just witnessed his impact on the U.S. election, which earned him a role in the upcoming Trump administration. Now, the Tesla CEO, ex-owner, and SpaceX founder has his sights set across the pond on British politics. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us live from London to explain. Matt, what is Elon Musk up to now?
Yeah, well, Jonathan, obviously he's been spending a lot of time trolling, and not just political figures in the United States, but even MSNBC, as I know you've been paying attention to over the past week or two. But, you know, we've just been seeing this worldwide. And, of course, he's buoyed by his recent victory, propping up Donald Trump and helping him win the election just earlier this month. Now we're seeing that Elon Musk's trolling knows no bounds and no borders. Lately, he's been turning his ire here at the Labour, the sort of center-left government here in Britain, particularly its Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Now, he's been tweeting a lot over the past year against Keir Starmer and against the Labour government, but it really has picked up a lot over just the past couple of days. And I want to show you on Sunday his tweet. I don't know if we're calling it tweet on X, a platform that he owns. He wrote, "The people of Britain have had enough of a tyrannical police state." And you can see there he was tweeting along with a survey, a petition that the government would be obliged to take up, or at least the parliament would be obliged to discuss after it reaches a certain number of signatories. And this is a petition calling for a rerun of the elections that brought Keir Starmer to power in an overwhelming majority just as recently as last July. Now, that petition, which had 1 million signatories when Elon Musk retweeted that, it now has 2 million and climbing. So it looks like it's at least going to have to be maybe discussed by the parliament as part of those rules. The day before that, he had tweeted that the voice of the people is a great antidote, showing the declining popularity levels for Keir Starmer, whose government, while it was, again, elected to an overwhelming majority back in July, has been facing quite a few problems and quite a few things that have caused it to become unpopular. But Musk then also went a step further and tweeted a documentary by a very famous far-right activist here in Britain, whose name our audience may or may not know. His name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, also known here popularly as Tommy Robinson. Now, he was just sentenced, he's a couple of months in, to an 18-month prison sentence for contempt of court for his role in defaming a child, an adolescent Syrian refugee back several years ago. Now, Tommy Robinson admitted guilt in this case, but his time in prison, his sentence has still been seen as very controversial among the far right here in Britain and even in the United States, where he's a well-known name in far right circles. Now, what did 10 Downing Street say in response to all of this hazing over the past couple of days? Well, almost nothing. We heard from Keir Starmer from 10 Downing saying that they're not surprised that the people of Britain want another election, even though we just had one here back in July, very recently. So actually, the Prime Minister has come into some criticism from the left-wing politicians here who say that Keir needs to stand up to Elon Musk. And this really just goes to show what has changed. Well, Elon Musk is now very much not in power per se, but he is a very close confidant of incoming President Donald Trump, who just last night, as you mentioned earlier in the program, had said he wants to impose 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada unless they rein in drug imports and other issues, and something like 35% on China unless they do the same thing. Now, he hasn't yet swung his knife at Europe and a lot of other countries. Officially, he's not in office yet, but there's a lot of worries here in the UK and throughout Europe that Donald Trump could start to levy very, very heavy tariffs on countries that he does not like. And so having a Keir Starmer who is out of the White House, who's considered not a friend of Elon Musk, the president's closest confidant by far, could be seen by many people here as very dangerous. But this isn't the first time that we've been seeing all this from Elon Musk. He's been attacking Keir Starmer for the better part of the past year, and governments here in Europe. Just a couple of months ago, when there were race riots here in Britain, we heard from Elon Musk. He tweeted out that civil war is inevitable here in Britain. And this was thanks to right-wing protesters who came out due to misinformation online about the identity of a child murderer who killed 3 young girls in the town of Southport at a dance event. And this has been causing huge protests, at least a couple of months ago, among the right here. And essentially, Elon Musk was saying that given the amount of immigration here, that civil war is inevitable. But if you go back a year, there were 4 tweets where Elon Musk had been saying that civil war is inevitable throughout Europe. So this calling of a civil war is one of Musk's favorite games. Jonathan?
NBC's Matt Bradley reporting live from London. Matt, thank you very much. And Susan, it's worth a moment just to take time and perspective on just the incredible influence that Elon Musk has. We've never really seen this before. A private citizen, a billionaire many times over, spending the amount of money he did in the Trump campaign, taking over in many ways, its get out the vote operations, being lockstep with Trump, down the stretch, basically moving into Mar-a-Lago, getting some sort of quasi-government post, having the president's ear, and now potentially trying to influence foreign policy.
It's amazing. Presidents have had best friends before, but they've never had a best friend like Elon Musk, given such a central role. And without the accountability of an appointment, he is, in fact, I think more powerful because he's not in the cabinet, because he's not on the White House staff. He is a free agent who has the president's ear. And it's got to be perplexing. We just heard that Tim Downing is being pretty quiet about responding to Elon Musk. They're probably figuring out what in the world to say, because in August, when he began to make these very critical statements of the prime minister, the Labour government kind of dismissed him. And now maybe they're figuring that is no longer an option if he's a figure that's going to have real power in the new White House.
All right. Well,
Former Congressman Matt Gaetz flamed out after hitting one of the very few guardrails left in Trump's D.C. Trump's remaining appointees may have a much easier time getting confirmed. According to reporting by Hugo Lowell at The Guardian today, Trump officials are set to receive immediate clearances and easier FBI vetting. Lowell reports that Trump's political appointees will only face FBI background checks after the incoming administration takes over the FBI and its own officials are installed in key positions. Here to explain why that should be alarming to everybody is Democratic Congressman Jim Himes, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, I'm glad to have you here. I mean, on its face, it seems disturbing that you would do away with the FBI vetting process. But another layer is waiting until Trump officials are actually installed and have access to, classified information and, state secrets before you actually begin to vet them. What troubles you most about this potential scenario?
Not surprising, right? We saw this as a president who decided he would take very sensitive materials with him to Mar-a-Lago. That criminal case, of course, has been dismissed, but this is an administration and a president who has shown disregard for classified information. And the reason this is so important is because, particularly in a complicated world, Iran, North Korea, China, Russia, desperate to understand our secrets, to know the capabilities that we have. And you can spin any number of scenarios. I mean, one of the reasons we do background checks is to see if perhaps an individual with access to classified information maybe has friends who we suspect of being spies, who maybe has something in their background that could be used to blackmail them. Something that is not known, but a Chinese intelligence officer can say, hey, if you don't report back to me on XYZ, we're going to expose you here. So it's a dumb risk to take. Especially since at the end of the day, transitions are used to getting this done very, very quickly in a way that does protect national security.
I got to ask you, I think that the question seems obvious, the answer seems obvious at first, but because of your expertise, I'm curious to know how you think about this. We have reporting that the Trump team has been relying on private lawyers to do some of the background checks for its appointees. I am aware that they would presumably have less eyes on in terms of potential compromised, positions some of these appointees may have. But could you talk specifically about how much weaker a vetting by a private lawyer would be compared to a proper FBI background check?
Sure. I mean, look, a private lawyer is being paid an hourly fee, right? And they may be reasonably good at a, traditional civil investigation. But, looking into somebody's background, understanding who is connected to who, that Korean individual that you actually spent a week with in London 2 weeks ago, there's no way that a lawyer, in the United States has access to the kind of information and an understanding for the networks that exist out there designed to compromise these people in the same way that the FBI would. So look, it's a silly thing. It's particularly silly given that a lot of the folks, I mean, you start with Matt Gaetz, who fortunately is off the scene right now, but Tulsi Gabbard was an elected official, a member of Congress, ran for president, has never been through this process, has never had, to my knowledge anyway, other than perhaps because of her service in the National Guard, access to, strategic level secrets. And so there's just a huge exposure here that need not be undertaken. But the Trump administration just seems to be, partly just pointing a big middle finger at anything that is traditional or conventional, a lot of it which is there for a reason.
Seems to be pointing a big middle finger, or actually is. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, the job of investigating Tulsi Gabbard's background has fallen in some ways to the media. Mother Jones has an investigative piece looking at Tulsi Gabbard's numerous super PACs. There are multiple ones that have, and they found unidentifiable donors, suspicious spending. There are like a lot of questions about who was bankrolling effectively some of her campaign arms. I know you're not in the Senate, but if she is, in fact, goes through the confirmation process, what questions would you have for Tulsi Gabbard, seeing as she could be the director of national intelligence?
Well, look, I've worked with a number of directors of national intelligence for a long time. There's really two key characteristics in that job. Number one, it's a massive administrative job, coordinating 17 or 18 different intelligence agencies. It's a huge leadership, management, almost like corporate management, like running a big corporation. Number one, that is not something that Tulsi Gabbard has ever done. She's run for elected office pretty much her whole life. And so there is a question about whether she's got the basic managerial competence, and even more concerning, and the second attribute of a good senior intelligence person is that they, regardless and at any cost, will speak truth to power. They cannot let their own opinions, they cannot let, the concern about what the boss may want to hear interfere with what they say. And look, Tulsi Gabbard has been a purveyor of conspiracy theories for a long time, that they were doing, biomedical experiments in Ukraine, and maybe that's why Russia invaded Ukraine. I mean, the conspiracy theories go on and on and on. And if I were a senator, I would want to say, hey, what's the deal? What is your attraction to these conspiracy theories? And how can you make me comfortable that, you will be nothing but 100% straight shooter when you provide intelligence to the president of the United States?
What do you make of Trump commissioning an investigation into Boris Epstein, his longtime his lawyer, who apparently was trying to shake down potential cabinet nominees? Do you think it's like a sign of hope that Trump's vaguely interested in, grift? I'm saying that with, the caveat that it is Trump we're talking about.
Well, look, it's, the intensity of the grift is just staggering. I mean, we've seen this from moment one, and it must be really confusing to be in the Trump orbit, right? Because on the one hand, this is the guy that sells Trump Bibles and Trump steaks, Trump University, Trump this, Trump that, even while campaigning, Trump sneakers, and it's okay for him to do that. The boss gets to do it, but no one else gets to do it. That must be sort of a confusing thing for it to be permissioned in the top guy, but obviously potentially a firing offense if you're not the top guy. So it must just be, a crazy town inside that operation.
I learned it from you, Dad. I learned it from watching you. Do you guys remember that ad? I'm betraying my age here. Congressman Jim Himes, thank you again for your time tonight. Really, really great to have your perspective and expertise on this.
Thank you, Alex.
Even allies of Donald Trump are now admitting that his plan for tariffs are going to drive up the cost of pretty much everything for consumers. So why do it? One of the ostensible reasons he says he's launching this trade war is to end the scourge of fentanyl, which is a real and enormous problem facing the U.S.
A new report issued by the CDC says fentanyl now replaces heroin as the deadliest drug in America.
Authorities overwhelmed. So many deaths in Los Angeles, the school district is now putting the overdose-reversing drug Narcan in every school.
A more than 1,000% spike in overdose calls, likely caused by drugs laced with fentanyl.
It's an extremely powerful synthetic opioid that contributes to about 100,000 U.S. overdose deaths a year. And for the past decade, it's been laced into lots of other drugs. It's caused users of those drugs to overdose unwittingly. The problem is massive. Back in 2021, for instance, U.S. life expectancy dropped to its lowest level in 2 decades. And CDC data showed that even after COVID-19, of course, which was driving a lot of that, drug overdoses, most notably synthetic opioids like fentanyl, were the primary drivers of shorter American lifespans. So this is an enormous problem. And it's a problem that is so big, it doesn't have a fast or easy fix. There's no satisfying silver bullet. But something seems to be changing recently. After years of relentless rises in overdose deaths, New York Times reports, the United States has seen a remarkable reversal. For 7 straight months, according to federal data, drug fatalities have been declining. The difference is dramatic. It's the largest decrease on record. Now, there's a lot of reasons at play here. For instance, more funding for better treatment, education and prevention measures. That's largely coming from the federal government. In fact, back in September, when people started first asking about this drop in overdose fatalities and its causes, Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra told us on this show about their strategy, that they had done harm reduction measures that were taking hold across the country, making test strips and Narcan, a drug that reverses an opioid overdose, more readily available. So this was partly HHS federal policy. All of that was important, steadily helping to sort of beat back this scourge. But drug policy experts tell the Times they believe there's another surprising reason. That's changes in the drug supply itself, which are in turn influencing how people are using drugs. So for the first time since 2021, the Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, says the potency of street fentanyl in America has gone down. Pure fentanyl is becoming scarcer and also more expensive, in part because of law enforcement efforts, the White House says. There's another factor, and this brings us back to Trump and tariffs and what he's trying to do now. Last year, President Biden had this big bilateral meeting with the Chinese President Xi in California. I don't know if you remember this, but we covered it. He had a live press conference. And the big takeaway from that meeting was that both sides signed on to an agreement on stopping the flow of the chemical precursors that are largely generated in China and used to make fentanyl, to stop the flow from China to Mexico and the U.S. It was a rare area of open cooperation between U.S. and Chinese officials amidst a fraught relationship these days, helping reduce the supply chain of fentanyl in this country. So again, this is all a bunch of factors working together. There's no simple silver bullet here. But all these policies combined, the harm reduction, the increased treatment, the test strips, the attacking the precursor chemicals, it seems to be working. They're having an effect. The fact that this is working is, I would contend, a story that almost no one in America knows. Wasn't part of the Democratic campaign. And it's a good reminder of a sort of hard, well-worn truth. Building things and fixing things is a lot more difficult than breaking them. Solving difficult problems like an overdose epidemic requires a bunch of people coordinating their efforts, and the doing of that work, of governing, is much, much harder than populist posturing about the problems, which is what, to be fair, Donald Trump is quite skilled at.
When you lose a son or a daughter to fentanyl, or a wife or anybody else, but when you lose a son or daughter, your life is destroyed, their lives are destroyed, they've destroyed so many families. It comes from Mexico. Something's got to be done.
That something for Trump is to get tough, to crack down and stop these other countries from humiliating us by flooding us with drugs. But again, there's a record to look at here, right? Trump campaigned on stopping the fentanyl crisis when he won in 2016, and he created a task force after he won. And as you can see on this chart, despite all the hardline politics and his tough talk and his best efforts, what happened? Oh, overdose deaths just kept going up on his watch. They plateaued a bit in 2018 and then skyrocketed. Almost as if promises are easier than results. But what's happening there in the end? It's actually going down for the first time. And this is the fundamental issue we face. The guy that we just elected is not interested in the difficult, serious things you have to do to fix stuff. but he was adept at channeling people's frustration, genuine and righteous, correct frustration and rage about things like 100,000 Americans dying of fentanyl every year, these big complex problems, and making them feel seen and agreeing with them that the system sucks. But that does not actually fix our problems or their problems. This is not what he's in it for. The good news here is that it is possible to make improvements in people's lives. And sometimes we don't know how. Sometimes we know some of the solutions, and we have to try a bunch of stuff, and it takes hard work by a lot of people over a long time, including thousands of those, bad bureaucrats in the federal government. That's the good news. The bad news is that I think it's become harder than ever for anyone, the Democratic Party or the Paris campaign or Joe Biden in particular, to communicate and sell that basic truth to the American people.